Death is not the end. It's a shift in how we are remembered. Today, July 1st, we reflect on the lives of 10 extraordinary individuals whose work and legacy will endure far beyond this moment. This is our tribute.
Jim Shooter entered the comic book industry at age 13, writing Legion of Superheroes scripts for DC while still in high school. At 27, he became editor-in-chief at Marvel during a turbulent time and transformed the company.
Shooter enforced deadlines, improved internal cohesion, and demanded higher storytelling standards. He helped push X-Men, Avengers, and Fantastic Four into narrative maturity. Perhaps most famously, he oversaw Secret Wars, Marvel's first mega crossover, a marketing and creative juggernaut.
Later, he co-founded Valiant Comics, introducing new characters like Bloodshot and Exo Manowar.
His vision brought innovation, controversy, and renewed life to an industry at a crossroads.
I'm Jim Shooter. I've been in the comics business for 59 years. I think most people know me most as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics for 10 years. I did some writing while I was editor-in-chief. I wrote Secret Wars. I did the foundation stories for G.I. Joe and Transformers. I did a lot of other things. I wrote the Avengers. I wrote Daredevil. As a matter of fact, over the course of 10 years, I think I probably wrote at least one of each. So I was a writer too, but my main job was I ran the publishing. I had Stan Lee's old job. Yeah, I started when I was 13. I was working for DC Comics. I don't know if you want to see, but there's a picture of me right here. And this is the guy who hired me, Mort Weisinger. That's me, and I just turned 14 here. And that's my mother. I had to bring my mother on my first business trip to New York. I had to have my mother with me because I was only, I was underage. Wasn't fully formed as a creator yet. But this guy and other people taught me a lot. And so I worked every minute I could give them for 5 years for DC Comics. And eventually became editor-in-chief of Marvel. Started a few companies of my own. I founded Defiant, Valiant, and Broadway Comics. Worked for Dark Horse. Well, I love working on Spider-Man because that was my childhood favorite. And when I was at Marvel, my second favorite book to work on was The Avengers, because it's Earth's Mightiest Heroes. That was fun. And at DC, I would say my favorite was Superman, but at first I wasn't really good at it. I mean, Superman is difficult to write. And so, but I started to understand it, and I started to get, I thought, better at it. That became my favorite thing. Each one was a challenge, but that became one of my favorite things. And the other book I liked at DC was the one I started on, which was Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, which were featured in Adventure Comics. That was my two favorites. Yes, I'm here at the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention, and my name's Jim Shooter, and I have a lot of show and tell that I brought. And everything comes with a story, so if you see anything that looks interesting, I'll tell you how it got that way. I got some really great friends here. I think probably trying to stay here during the Berkshire Hathaway meeting and all the other things they got going on, and the Kentucky Derby, and the timing was probably not the greatest, but other than that, it is Free Comic Book Day, so it has to be today.
The movies the Marvel movies are out, what do you think of them?
I like most of them. I love Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. I've seen the Avengers ones, they're good. I saw the first couple of Iron Mans, I thought they were good. I think a lot of them are really terrific. And I'm glad it's all happening, because when I started as editor-in-chief in 1978, Marvel was dying. And it looked like we were going to go out of business. And the president of the company who hired me, I worked for the president, he said, I'm getting us out of this loser business and getting us into children's books and animation. And I said, you're so wrong. I said, this can be big and we can make it big. Also, Star Wars had just come out the year before. And when I saw what they could do with the special effects for space opera, I said, imagine what they could do with superheroes. I said, well, it's coming. The technology is going to catch up. So I was pretty confident there was going to be good movies. And in 1978, when the first Superman movie came out, You'll Believe a Man Can Fly, In 1978, I took my entire staff to the movies, the 35 people. We could only go to the earliest show in the morning because everything else was sold out. I took them all there, bought them tickets, bought them popcorn. I said, this is a watershed moment. And it was. There was a lull for a little while, and then there was that great Batman movie with Jack Nicholson, and I said, here it comes. You know, we're on our way.
Impressed that once what Kevin Feige's done with the MCU, it's almost kind of similar to what you did when you were editor-in-chief. You were a big umbrella guy. Let's tie everything together. Everybody is interconnected. You're not just, in Fantastic Four, you're not just in this world. Everyone is kind of interconnected, and that's kind of how they kind of...
Yeah, I guess the big difference is, and this is something Stan and I used to talk about, is that I was trying to create one universe. And Kevin, look, you can't argue with success. The guy's doing great, right? But he's doing like multiple worlds and multiple, you know, there's movies with 3 different Spider-Man and characters in them. And I think he's in danger of getting it to be too complicated. And Stan and I, when we saw what DC was doing with, you know, Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 12, Earth, all that stuff like that, we were laughing at it. Because we thought they're falling right down the rabbit hole here. And I just hope he avoids that. I hope he manages to keep it under control, keep it organized, because it does get a little complicated sometimes. I actually suggested that to them. When Jeanette Kahn came in as publisher, she said, well, you're supposed to be the comics guru, tell me what I should do. And I said, nuke it to the ground. I said, announce you're going to end the DC universe in January and march toward it. It ends in June. I said, I'm telling you how to sell a whole lot of books here, right? And then in July you start with number ones, but only the best characters. And you slowly build out from there. And they all live in the same world. And it's not Star City and, you know, Central City. They're all in the same world. They interact, there's continuity, and you don't do the dumb stuff. I mean, you do the same characters, you just don't do all the mistakes that were done, you know, in the past. And she said, oh, well, that's a really good idea. And Jerry Conway suggested something like that to her as well. But they didn't do it until we did Secret Wars. And they needed a big event. They did the first Crisis. The trouble was they didn't really do it all the way. And a lot of writers said, well, I'm exempt from that, I'm not doing it. And so you still had multiple continuities going on and much confusion, so they had to do it again. And they've done it how many times now? There was the Countdown, the New 52, and it's like
0 hour.
0 hour. It's, between what they took from Jim Starlin's work and some things they took from this, they're making it the giant event, which is good to do, I think. When I was just doing my first stories, the only thing I was thinking about was selling them because my family needed the money, right? And but then when I got more involved in the business, and I'd gone through training by some really wonderful people, Mort Weisinger, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Wally Wood, Kurt Smiley, I mean, the greatest people. I listened to every word they said. And so then I started to see the possibilities. And
Jim Shooter wasn't always easy, but he was essential. He believed that comics could be both art and business, and his influence is felt on every shelf today. In the world of theater, Mark Brokaw was known for his subtle hand and immense emotional insight. He directed How I Learned to Drive, As Bees in Honey Drown, and The Lions, stories that peeled back human psychology on the most intimate levels.
Off Broadway and on, Brokaw mentored countless playwrights and actors. He was a fixture at the Sundance Theater Lab and served as artistic director for Yale's Cabaret.
But it's you that conscience. I got pinned. Now I'm haunted by the memories of the pain I put people through. I am haunted by the memories. They say boo. They say boo. They say boo. The stars up above shine their light on.
A panel of doctors try to lock me away, but until that day when they finally do, I know, leave me alone.
I'm dying, Rita.
Yeah, I know, but try to be positive.
Our children are a disaster. Lonely and terrible. I blame you.
Do you think I'm a dreadful lush?
No, my lady.
I think I'm a dreadful lush. Now a toast. To me.
To you.
To you.
To me.
To socialism.
To socialism.
To peace.
To peace.
What else? To love.
To love.
To the workers.
The workers!
Bravo.
In order to do that, you'd have to be a fairy godmother. Hooray! But you are a crazy woman. What are you doing in that beautiful gown?
You'd be surprised how many beautiful gowns have crazy women in them. And now, dear Ella, it's time to make all your dreams come true.
The impossible.
Impossible. Impossible. Impossible.
Impossible.
Impossible. Impossible.
Mark rarely sought the spotlight. Instead, he shined it on others, and in doing so, left a legacy of truth-telling and theatrical bravery.
Dr. Joseph Giordano led the trauma team that treated President Ronald Reagan after the 1981 assassination attempt. He was just 39, head of surgery at George Washington University Hospital, and suddenly the most trusted doctor in the country.
But Giordano was more than a man who saved a president. He co-developed trauma protocols now used nationwide, taught generations of surgeons, and published pioneering research on battlefield injuries.
He was also deeply human,
thought that I would,
known to sit with
talk about
patients'
some things
families
that
for
we sometimes
hours,
don't talk about when
offer
we talk
hope
about this
without
incident.
promises,
And the first
and
thing
remain
I'd like to
humble
review
in the
with
face of
everybody is
international
what trauma
fame.
care was like in the 50s and the 60s. You know, if you're my age, you remember back in the 50s, the ambulances. The ambulances were these big Cadillacs. They weren't necessarily old, but these big fins in the back, and there was a door in the back that opened up, and they would throw the patient back there. It was always seemed kind of cramped, and I never quite understand, even as a youngster, why they would buy a Cadillac. I mean, it seemed the most expensive car then, and there was no good reason for it. But trauma care or any kind of care was very poorly developed, especially in emergency medical services. And anybody could run those ambulances. In fact, in some localities, the funeral director ran it, conflict of interest notwithstanding. But it was the way it was done in those days. And then we had the Vietnam conflict. And as in many wars, a lot of the advances in medicine began on the battlefield. And in Vietnam, they learned that if you have a rapid response to trauma patients, if you triage them quickly, if you can get them, stabilize them, and get them to a hospital or a place that can give first-class services, then there's a very good chance that the individual will survive. And in fact, this is the so-called golden hour. If you can get everything done within 1 hour, then you're way ahead of the game. And in fact, they showed some very impressive statistics. And severely injured soldiers, in this particular case, treated during the Vietnam conflict. It dawned on people back in the United States as these reports were filtering back that, gee, maybe we could do that in the civilian sector. As a matter of fact, in 1970, a white paper was published, and I believe it was published by the Institute of Medicine, although I'm not sure about that, which was it? Department of Transportation, thank you. Which basically was entitled Trauma Care, the Neglected Disease of the 20th Century. And it outlined how bad we were and how poor we managed these cases, and they recommended establishing a trauma type of approach that was done in Vietnam. And slowly, in the late 60s, early 70s, this took hold. And it took hold in Washington. Just about the time I was arriving at GW, I did my training here, finished in 73, was in Walter Reed for 3 years, and then 1976, Dr. Atkins asked that I come on the staff here, and he gave me 2 jobs. One was to do vascular surgery. Number 2, he said, oh, by the way, I want you to take care of the emergency room. You're in charge of that for the next year and a half. And then he said, oh, trauma is a mess. Will you please straighten it out? So at that time, I was the old system, you know, and I didn't have a lot of information to go on. So I spent a month at shock trauma, and I realized how inappropriate we were in treating cases, not only at the institution, but also in the city and so forth like that. And then all things kind of started to happen. Committees were formed, trauma centers were designated, and I must say that we were very successful and had a lot of support of the institution to establish a trauma team here at GW, which began around 1977, 1978, and by the time the president came in 1981, it was a well-trained team. So I do believe that that was one of the reasons why things went so well. Very briefly now, the second reason is that we never had a VIP syndrome. Everybody knows about this. People who are well-to-do, prominent, so forth like that, they become injured, they become acutely ill, and everybody starts running around and they're getting experts from this part of the country, that part of the country, phone calls, etc. Before you know, you have a committee. And things never worked that well. And I'll tell you what happened that day, just about this time, 25 years ago. Dan Ruge, who was the physician to the president, former neurosurgeon, wonderful guy. He was in the trauma bay when I arrived, and he pulled me aside and he says, look, he said, you're in charge. I don't want to hear anything, okay? You just do it the way you always do it, and we were not going to interfere. And that was key. It was very important. I can tell you story upon story, but I'll tell you one.
Thankfully.
I'll talk more after, right, Bob? Brian Blades was the chairman of surgery at GW, and a very prominent thoracic surgeon. And you may recall, if you don't recall, you may know that President Eisenhower had intestinal obstruction sometime in the middle of his term, and he was taking a surgery at Walter Reed, and they had a team of 8 to 10 doctors. Dr. Blades was one of them, and he was there because he was a thoracic surgeon, and just in case he needed his chest cracked to pump his heart, in case he had a respiratory cardiac arrest at the time of operation. But But he said that when they opened the envelope, they found a obstructed point, and to their surprise, it was a point of regional ileitis, which was an inflammation of the bowel. And everybody, the way they would treat it, would resect that portion and put the bowel back together. But they didn't do that. They did what they call a side-to-side anastomosis, which nobody could understand what they did. And I asked Dr. Blades when he told me this story, he says, how come? He says, it was a committee. And you know, the committee works, they had the lowest common denominator, the easiest, simplest thing to do, not necessarily the right thing, what everybody kind of agreed upon with no controversy. They did it. The president did fine. I'm very happy about that. But the point is that there was never a VIP syndrome at GW in that day, and that was a key part of why things went well. And I guess my time up. Okay, I'll turn it back to Rob. But those are the two
A
things
surgeon,
I want people to think
a
about,
teacher,
because we heard all
a
the other
healer.
things,
Dr. Giordano's calm in crisis quite literally saved a presidency and countless lives after. Richard Boucher was the voice of American foreign policy for more than a decade. He served under 6 secretaries of state and became the most enduring spokesperson in the department's modern history.
Fluent in French and Chinese, Boucher bridged worlds. From North Korea to the Balkans, he gave clarity to chaos, often answering the world's toughest questions in front of a press room filled with doubt.
Well, I think, first of all, it's heart-wrenching to see what the Afghans are going through and how they're trying to scramble to take care of their families and themselves. This withdrawal was the product of years of planning. In some ways, this is a Trump administration plan carried out by the Biden administration, and so you have the culmination of a plan to withdraw. And in the end, we didn't leave behind an Afghan government and an Afghan military that could take care of the country, that could take care of itself. And that is a failure that goes back much deeper and much longer.
He wasn't flashy. He was steady, reliable, measured. In a world of sound bites, Richard Boucher offered substance.
Nicknamed the Cobra, Dave Parker had a swing that made pitchers flinch and a personality that lit up stadiums. The 1978 National League MVP, Parker helped lead the Pittsburgh Pirates to the 1979 World Series title.
Standing 6 feet 5 inches, he dominated on and off the field, later mentoring young players including Barry Bonds and Eric Davis. His story is also one of resilience, battling addiction, rebuilding his image, and fighting Parkinson's disease with unshakable dignity.
You have this long, tall black guy, 6'6", 235. He could carry a ball club all by himself. He was deadly. He would strike like a cobra.
Dave Parker, the Cobra, is an outstanding athlete with exceptional speed.
The nickname Cobra. Got started by a trainer, Tony Balderone, who was a big boxing fan. Ezra Charles was a great boxer out of Cincinnati, and they called him the Cincinnati Cobra. And he associated me being from Cincinnati and my batting stance, where I held my bat close to my ear and wiggled it and stopped it just before making my pass at the ball. And that's how the Cobra got started.
Drafted by Pittsburgh in 1970, 22-year-old Dave Parker began his big league career with the Pirates in '73. By 1975, he'd have the full-time right field job, along with the unenviable task of replacing Pirate right fielder and legend Roberto Clemente, who died tragically following the '72 season.
The media tried to make a big issue out of it, replacing Roberto. And I was fortunate to have a mentor, Willie Starger, who kept emphasizing to me, you're not going to be the next Clemente, you're going to be the first Dave Parker.
Despite huge shoes to fill, Parker impressed quickly. In his first 5 full seasons, he hit over 300 each year, led the league in hitting twice, and emerged as the Bucs' top offensive weapon.
Parker was the key to the middle of our lineup, and the reason why the lumber company was so productive during that period of time was because Dave Parker was the guy that everybody had to worry about.
He won the MVP in '78, but I would say from '77, '78, and '79, he was the best player in all of baseball.
Parker's 5-tool talent was matched by his swagger.
So you think they're gonna win in the East? You gotta be out of their mind.
And perhaps the most awe-inspiring facet of his game was his throwing arm.
I took a lot of pride in that, playing right field and the history of Roberto and his throwing arm. That gave me fuel to try to live up to what he had established as an outfielder.
The 1979 All-Star Game allowed Parker to show off his rifle before a national audience. Not once.
Kenneth delivers a 2-out blow as Downing turns for home.
but twice.
And what a throw by Dave Parker. Oh, baby, what a play.
Parker's defense was rewarded as he was named MVP in the NL's one-run triumph. He also excelled for the We Are Family 1979 Pirates World Series squad. With 10 hits and a .345 batting average, Parker helped his team rebound from a 3-1 deficit to win the series.
You always got to look at 79 as the first one, and the first one always means the most.
Parker seemed destined for continued greatness, but not long after making headlines by earning $1 million for a season, things soured in Pittsburgh. Parker struggled with injuries, weight issues, and cocaine use.
I made the mistake. It was a part of my life. Ain't nothing I can do to go back and erase that, but I can try to work in a positive manner from this point on.
After 1983, Parker returned to where he grew up, signing with Cincinnati as a free agent. The move reignited his past greatness.
First ball heading wide, deep to right field. That one is gone.
In his second season with the Reds, he finished second in MVP voting as he led the league in doubles, RBIs, and total bases. But it wouldn't be until 1988 that the Cobra would return to the World Series after being acquired by Oakland for his bat and leadership.
The team had good talent. I think what they needed was some people that had won already. So I think supplying attitude was a part of my role. Along with that, they needed a left-hand power hitter.
And he gets a high drive to deep right field, and Dave Parker has hit his first World Series home run.
His first series homer, but his second championship ring as the A's swept the Giants in the '89 Fall Classic.
We hung in there like we've been doing all year, and that's why we're the best in the world, #1.
In his 19-year career with 6 different teams, Parker amassed over 2,700 hits and was a 7-time All-Star. The Cobra played the game with a style and swagger that will long be remembered.
My confidence level has always been very high. I believed in my ability, and I even made a quote one time, if you want to know how good I am, ask me, I'll tell you.
Parker was more than a star. He was a fighter, on the field, in the locker room, and in life.
Betty Rowland Probasco wasn't just a great golfer. She was a symbol of grace and Southern sportsmanship.
She won the Tennessee and Kentucky women's amateur titles and captained the U.S. Curtis Cup team. Later, she became a beacon for young Christian athletes, supporting youth golf and faith-based mentoring.
Well, hello everybody, and I'm Betty Probasco, and I wanted everybody to know that FCA is near and dear to my heart, as it was to my husband, who's been deceased for now 5 or 6 years. But I have been supporting FCA here in Chattanooga for some 60 years now, and I think it's the most wonderful organization that you could ever be a member of, and I'm proud to have my name connected with FCA. And it, you know, as I've always said, the combination of sports and Christ, you cannot beat that combination, because that's what we're all about, is the Lord, and the FCA is doing a fabulous job bringing young people to Christ, because as many of you know, you can only reach some of them through sports, because otherwise they're not interested at all. And what's really been such a help to us, other than having the great leadership we've had here in Chattanooga with Jay Fowler for the past 20 years, is the fact that we have all these wonderful coaches who participate as leaders in the groups that we have at the schools. And we're in, I forget how many schools here, something like 60, I think. 60 schools we minister to. And we have fabulous young people coming up through those schools. And it's a pleasure for me to have served on the national board and to have served, help with the fundraisings to the extent to which I can. And FCA is just, as I say, near and dear to my heart. And I hope all of you will continue to support us. And I've known some well-known famous people that are crazy about FCA and love it too. And we're just fortunate to have it, and I'm grateful for it, and grateful for what it does for young people in bringing them to Christ.
At 95, Betty passed peacefully, but her impact on women's sports and her community is enduring.
As the first black director of a major U.S. physics lab, John Peoples Jr. shattered barriers in science. He led Fermilab from 1989 to 1999, modernizing facilities, championing international cooperation, and mentoring young scientists of color.
Peoples also helped manage the U.S. involvement in CERN's Large Hadron Collider. In a world of complexity, he believed in access, clarity, and diversity in discovery.
His legacy? Science for everyone. Knowledge without borders. Leadership by example.
Kenneth Fried brought music to life. As conductor of the Mankato Symphony Orchestra, his performances blended precision with passion.
Trained at Juilliard, Fried believed music should stir the soul, not just impress the ear. His concerts were community events, accessible, uplifting, and emotional.
Hello, my name is Ken Fried, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the power of music and what it's meant to me personally. Music has been a great source for me of pride and love, because I've seen how music can inspire, it can open minds, it can educate children in cognitive development and emotional development, but most importantly, the ability to create community, to create a community around music and musicians is something that I have fervently always believed in. I have been really fortunate and lucky to work in a variety of areas to develop a portfolio of experience that will be useful for orchestral leadership. Starting with my work as a player in the Minnesota Orchestra, an elite ensemble, and watching Osmo Vanska build an elite team that could record, go around the world, and then working through the committee system, the Artistic Advisory Committee, the Members Committee, working on strategic planning with board and staff and management, and also working in development, working in education, working in outreach, and taking all that I learned to my work as the music director of the Mankato Symphony, a smaller shop, but again working on budgets, strategic planning, mission, community partnering with American Indians, children at risk in the Mankato public school system, lobbying at the state legislature. All of these have been growing and learning experiences for me. We find ourselves at a time in the evolution of the orchestra where we need fresh thinking, fresh perspectives, fresh frameworks. We also need someone who is a musician to the core. I feel the time has come for me to step up and make a contribution. We all want an orchestra that is around for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
He may be gone, but his final note still echoes in every heart he touched.
For nearly 75 years, Sam's Bakery in Fall River was Georgette Yamin's stage. She made flatbread, memories, and a whole lot of friends.
She co-founded the bakery with her husband, preserving Lebanese recipes passed down generations. To locals, Georgette wasn't just a baker. She was a second grandmother.
A quiet, flower-dusted legacy, but one filled with love.
With 4 Kentucky Derby wins and 20 Breeders' Cup titles, Dwayne Lukas redefined horse racing. He trained legends like Thunder Gulch, Winning Colors, and Charismatic.
But his greatest contribution may have been his discipline and focus. Lukas applied techniques from his background in education, treating each horse as an athlete and each race as a lesson.
Wayne, how would you sum up this journey that you've been on and all the successes that you've had and people that you've impacted through the years?
You know, you live in the moment, I think, is the best way to describe it. I remember when I was 16 or 17 and we were running at the county fairs in Wisconsin, as far from par mutual as you could probably get. And I always thought, boy, if I could just be lucky enough to run a horse where they actually bet on it, it was official. And that was my goal. I had no idea what was about to happen, but I think if you fall in love with it, like you and I are, you keep pushing ahead, and then that coaching background, I think, makes you competitive to where you're just looking for the next one all the time. But it has been a journey.
What was it like growing up in Antigua, Wisconsin, the northern part of Wisconsin? It seems like it's on the moon compared to where the places that you've gone.
Pretty close to the moon. It's a farming community. I think it's gotten up to 8,000 now, but I think it was 6 when I was in high school there. A lot of potato farmers. The potatoes were big there, and of course dairy farms. And it was typical. I went to a one-room school, and when I was from the 4th grade to a freshman in high school, I was never in a class of more than 2. Charlene Schrader and I were the only 2. I graduated with a class of 2 from the 8th grade, and I was second in my class. Charlene was she was more focused than I was.
And then you go off to UW-Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison. What was that experience like?
Well, that changed me a lot, because I ended up in my freshman or sophomore year working for a high-end clothing store on the Capitol Square. And it impressed me to see how those people from, those high-end professionals, either in the business community or, in politics, they walk different, they talk different, they were different. And I thought, these guys got their act together. And I decided that I was going to work towards being more professional and tried to carry it to the racehorse industry a little bit.
What did you do when you graduated from University of Wisconsin?
I got a little coaching job at a really small community called Blair. And I was there just 2 years. And I had a chance to go back as the freshman coach at Wisconsin. And so I jumped at that, and I got my master's degree at the same time. It was really a good deal. And that was when the freshmen weren't eligible to play like they are now. It was a whole different structure in the NCAA. But I went back, and then when I graduated and went out next time, I ended up with a very, very good job in La Crosse, Wisconsin, high-end high school. And the horses kept pulling pretty hard, so I lasted about 7 more years with that, knowing that probably the horses were going to get the best of me. My mother said, you can't be fooling around with these horses. You have to do something worthwhile with your life. You got to make a contribution. You have to do something that you can't just fool around with these horses.
So how did you make the jump? Like, what was the push to move back to the horses and get involved in the quarter horses?
Well, I never stopped. That was the difference. I was running every summer, Park Jefferson, South Dakota, all through there, Omaha, Nebraska, and everything. I was running in the summers. And what happened is 1970, they went to year-round racing in California for quarter horses. And when that happened, I decided that the horses were going to be my life, and I resigned and started pushing the quarter horses. The reason I had the quarter horses when I was coaching is I could get them ready to run. They didn't have to have as much ground on fitness, so forth, so it was a little easier to do it. But the quarter horses were a very good background for me. Very good.
What made it so good?
Well, I think, and Bob Baffert and I have talked about this a lot. I think that we both paid more attention to conformation and what a racehorse should look like. in his movement and everything. The quarter horses, the registrations was very new. I think 49 was the first year. And you'd see registration papers, and I questioned if that was the sire of the dam. There wasn't no, they didn't take a hair follicle or anything to check it. So you ended up buying horses that looked like athletic horses that could win. Then in '74, I did both. I was running at Hollywood Park in the daytime, Los Alamitos at night.
And was that were you motivated to get into the thoroughbreds? What was it? Why did you, because if I read this correctly, in the span of 10 years, you had 24 champions in quarter horse racing?
23 or 4, yeah.
So what was the motivation, the reason to move towards the thoroughbreds?
Well, a number of things happened. First of all, we were very successful. We were winning the right races, had the right horses, the right champions. My son Jeff would say to me, "Dad, we got to go across town. We can beat him over there just as easy as we're beating him here." And he pushed for that, and I was reluctant because I didn't know if my clientele would come with me. And actually, only one of them did when I did make the break and go full thoroughbreds. But we started building clientele over there very quickly. And we had the first meet at Santa Anita, we only had 4 horses. We got along pretty good. I think that your success in this game is the only thing that keeps you going. You know what I mean? People look at successful trainers, and if you're not very successful, if I'd have switched and not been very successful right off the bat, I think that it probably wouldn't have been such a great journey as you pointed out. I had Terlingua in the barn, bought her just because I trained her mother at Riadosa, and ended up running her, winning the Philly stake. 3 weeks later, I run her against the Colts, beat the Colts. The next thing, she's on the magazine covers. And Effervescing comes along. We bought him. He was supposed to be finished and going to the stud. I got him going good and won 2 grade 1s in 4 days with him. 1 on the grass, 1 on the dirt. Well, that kind of stuff really got people's attention.
Would you say that going fast forward to 1980 and the Preakness win with Codex, did that really push you even further?
Well, I never thought I would have a horse in the classics, but I'm riding my pony down through the barn area of Santa Anita, and an elderly gray-haired guy says, "Stop." He said, "I'm going to send you some horses. I'll see you in about an hour." And I just switched over from the quarter horses. And I rode a little bit further, and I ran into Jerry Fanning, another trainer, and I said, "Who's that gray-haired guy?" He just stopped me and said he's going to send me some horses. Now, you got to remember, I had a stable of 4 at that point. And he said, "That's John Nayrud." He said, "If he'll send them, if he said he's going to send them." So here he comes about an hour later, and he said, "I'm going to send you some 2-year-olds." In that group was Codex. So now we're going along, and Codex looks like he's going to be a racehorse and going to help us get where we want to go. So we end up going to the Preakness, and John Nayrud hadn't nominated him for the Kentucky Derby because John was involved with that miss of the wire or with Shoemaker or whatever had happened that time. He was sour on the Derby. So he let me go to the Preakness with him, and of course we won the Preakness with a lot of controversy too, with the supposedly bushing and bumping of Genuine Wrist, the Derby winner.
What is it about the Preakness that you've had so much success? Is there a reason? I mean, obviously you have to have a good horse to win the Preakness, but what is it specifically about the Preakness that has been so good to you?
First of all, it's our favorite race, you know, not because we've won it 7 times, but just because they treat you so great, and it's kind of a lot of camaraderie there. All the stake horses in one barn and everything. And Baffert and I have talked about that a lot. We like it. But the thing about the Preakness, I think in the early years, I was so foolish and had such grandiose ideas that I was going to win all 3. when I had a good horse. And it sounds crazy, but I think I was using the Kentucky Derby as a prep to get to the other two. I had the mindset if I could get squeezed by and get lucky in the Derby, then turn the screws down a little tighter in the Preakness and then go to the Belmont. After a few sessions of that, I figured out I better try to win the Derby and not worry about the Preakness till it comes up.
Is there one that immediately comes to mind in all the wins that you had in the Preakness Stakes?
Yes. I would have to point out that Probasco Cat was the horse that ran over my son and caused the head injury that lasted all for years to come. But you can't blame the horse, and I never did. I decided to make him the best horse I could possibly make. And so here he comes through. He doesn't win the Kentucky Derby, but he gets the Preakness and the Belmont, so that would be the one.
How did you as a father navigate that accident with Jeff? How as a father were you able to cope with that and carry on with, training horses and the rest of it?
It affected the barn, and we were so naive about the severity of the accident, 5 years of rehab and things of that nature. And it was the 40-some days he was in a coma. You start to realize that this is a serious, tough thing. And Randy Bradshaw was working for me, and he took over the barn, and I spent most of my nights in the hospital waiting for him to come out of the coma.
And you said that you never wanted to hold it against Probasco Cat, the horse that did this. Did you have that mindset immediately?
No. What happened was all the grooms were very close to Jeff also, and they were bitter towards the horse. And it was the animosity towards that horse in the barn was apparent. And I got to thinking about it, and I thought, you know what, we're going to turn the corner with Jeff, and we need to make this horse the best possible horse we could. And we were slipping in the standings at Santa Anita. We weren't, because the whole atmosphere in the barn had changed with that accident. And so I called them all together, and I said, we're going to change this completely. We're going to see if we can take this horse all the way to the Triple Crown. And that was right in December.
We could sit here for days and talk about all the years, 2,700 trophies you told me are now at the Derby Museum. In all of this, what are you most proud of?
Probably those guys that came through, the Todd Pletchers, Karen McLaughlin, Mike Maker, all of those guys, Dallas Stewart. I think that I think that being able to maybe help them through, get to where they want to go, sharing, helping them raise themselves. They weren't always quite as polished as they are now. And I think that really will be our legacy.
I just envisioned Todd Pletcher being born with a suit on.
Yeah, now. He when he came to work for me, I'd known his father, J.J. Pletcher, and he'd worked about a month for Charlie Whittingham. And then he came over to us, and I said, what'd you learn over there with Charlie? He said, I don't know. He said, he just told me to shut up and watch, you'll learn. And so we took a different step. The coaching background came out in me strong. I started teaching. I'd say, we're going to work this horse, half a mile today, and I don't want to do anything the rest of the week with him. And I don't want him to say, okay, boss. I want him to say, why? Why would we do that? And Todd and Dallas and them, they were very good to question, hey, boss, what the hell are we doing this for, And I think that I was able to pass on what I knew and had learned through trial and error and put them maybe a little ahead, although I think that all of those guys would have been going to be really good horsemen. See, if you have passion about it, you eliminate the excuses. That's true of anything. It's you, everybody. When you have passion, you'll drive all night, you'll go without lunch, you'll do things that make no sense if you have a passion in your profession. And you have to have that. That's what keeps driving you. I'm going to be 90 this summer, and I could probably get by without getting up at 3:30 a.m. every day and being out there. But I want to get out there, and I beat everybody at the barn today.
Could you just not imagine not being on that horse every morning? What is it that pushes you to do it every day?
That's the most comfortable I am. I don't know what it is. I don't think I'll train horses if I can't ride that pony every day. I don't know where this is all going to end. We don't talk about retirement too much, do we? I don't think so. I'd like to get another one this summer, one or two of those better ones. And I don't want to hang around with older people, because you go to dinner and within the conversation, you get a group of my age, I guarantee you it won't be 2 minutes. You won't even get the menu yet, and somebody will start talking about his health. They'll start telling you how they feel and what's wrong with them and what they overcome and everything else. The whole conversation goes there. Now, if you go with a bunch of 30-year-olds, they never mention their health. They could care less. They're going to talk about their girlfriends or whatever. So I like to be around those young people. But I love to see them grow. Like Tyler Bacon impressed me. I waited a week. I watched him ride, and I one day just said, you know, that kid's okay. I'm going to see if I can maybe help him a little bit. So I called him in, and I got a legal pad out, and I said, I'm going to show you something about this racetrack. Half of the race is turns. So you don't make any moves on the turn anymore. You're wearing the horse out. You commit to the turns, and I drew it out for him and everything, and he was very receptive. And I'm teaching him every day yet. And I think he's going to go to Prairie Meadows, and I'll lose track of him, but I feel real good about what I've done so far.
What's one question that you've been asked that you hate being asked? Is there something through the years?
The one that's asked the most is, what's the best horse you ever trained? Everybody wants to know what's the best one. My answer to that is, what year are you talking about? Because the one that was the best that year is the one I liked the most. I mean, I could have never predicted that the Magner group, Michael Tabor, were going to drop this little pony that ended up being Thunder Gulch in the barn, you know, and stuff like that. He won us all over.
But you don't like being asked who's the best horse you've ever trained?
Well, I answer it. I think the best horse I ever trained was Dash for Cash, a quarter horse. I never thought he would lose, and he didn't. Now, that's saying a lot. He'd lost a couple races as a 2-year-old when my good friend Bubba Cassio had him. But when I got him, I won every time with him. And I got so cocky sure that it was just fun. I'd say, try to get 9 in here, boys, because you're in deep doo-doo right here. You know, he just win.
He was obviously fast. What was it about him that...
He just was solid. He just, every time you took him over there, he showed up. I've had a lot of really good horses, and then some of them been a struggle. Charismatic, I thought, was a complete waste when he was 2. I mean, I couldn't get him to break 50 and a half mile, and I just thought, I'll never get this one. And then I switched up and tried something else and kept switching up and switching up. And not only does he win the Derby, he gets to be Horse of the Year. And I ran him for claim, because I ran him for $62,500 claim. And Bob Lewis, who owned him, said, Wayne, they write him for $25,000. Put him in there and get rid of him. these horses are really, really get inside you.
Is that an example, the charismatic journey, is that just an example of sometimes patience is needed, or is patience always needed?
I think patience to a degree is always needed, but some of these, I think some of the younger set that are training younger people now, they get too much information probably. I don't buy the form, I don't read the form. I don't have a stopwatch. I listen to you guys once in a while. But I just like to, they'll say, how do you think in this race? I said, I don't know, my horse is 8-1, I don't know what else is in here, you know.
Is that just trusting your instinct? Is that what you need to do, what people need to learn, I guess?
I just train my horses, and I don't worry about all the rest of them. You know, the Derby is the worst one for that. When these young trainers come to the Kentucky Derby, and they get in that bubble, like that glass house we all are in, and the press comes over, you guys come over and you say, wow, Bafford's horse just worked 12 flat, 112 flat for 6 furlongs. Well, some of those young guys will walk away and say, you know, I know what they're thinking. They'll say, guys, I didn't work my horse that hard. Maybe I should get him back over there tomorrow. And it might not be what that horses need, but they, you know, here's a Bafford winning the Triple Crown. I better pick my head up here and do a little something more. And that might not be what the horse needs. You got to stay disciplined in your own thoughts, and it's a trial and error thing anyhow.
Did you always have that discipline, or did you go through what you just described the first time you went to the Derby?
I don't think I went through it much. They said I was too cocky to listen, but I made my mistakes and lived with them. No, I never got caught up in that at all. Not a bit.
Did you feel like you were cocky when you were younger?
I was confident to a fault. When I come over to Hollywood Park in Santa Anita from the quarter horses, we won the stake, I think, the 3rd or 4th start that we had. And the clerk of scales said to me, I can remember it distinctly, he said, wow, cowboy, he said, didn't take you long to get a good one here. And I said, cocky me, I just said, well, you didn't think I came over here to practice, did you? But the horses will humble you. They'll bring you down, boy. You can get a little cocky, but they'll bring you to your knees. They have a marvelous way of doing that.
Is there one is there a moment, a race, a horse that you wish you could have back, have a second chance at?
Yeah. Capote. I bought Capote as a yearling, and he turned out to be really good 2-year-old, won the Hollywood Fraternity, and over the winter, he got an intestinal virus that really knocked him. He lost weight, his hair coat was bad and everything, and yet around February or March, maybe into March, he started to come around a little bit, and I pointed him for the Kentucky Derby. And in hindsight, what I know now, I would have never done that. He ran terrible. And he actually was never that good again, you know, even though he went to the stud and it was very popular. But I just thought I could overcome what nature had put in front of me there. And I would, looking back, I had no shot. I just should have never put him in the Derby.
You still having fun?
Yeah, every day. I like it. I like it. I like the camaraderie. I don't know, it seems like the elderly men and women, if they're not doing what we're doing, they go to the country club, talk about their golf scores all day and so forth, or there's a group that go that McDonald's every morning here. They're all retired men and everything. And I think they reach out that way. Where we in this business, boy, there are hundreds of them crossing our path all the time. I like that. I like to help the little ones. I like to influence them. That's why I take that small child to the winner's circle all the time. That's the most satisfying thing we do now. Again, I've been so blessed with winners that I tell Lori, just like yesterday, she said, I don't see anybody. I said, I think there's a little girl over there. And sure enough, we brought her down. But those 6- and 7-year-olds, you can't believe how it affects them to go down to the winner's circle. They're just awestruck. And it's the most satisfying thing we do. And then they get the kid to go over and ring the bell and do the whole thing. We send them to the photographer's office, right? I say in 15 minutes you can get this full picture. And it's on me, I pay for it. And if you're still around an hour later, I'll sign it, you know. But you would not believe the feedback that I get with letters from young people that are 25 or 30 years old now saying, I know you don't remember me, but when I was 9, you took me to the winner's circle from the crowd, and I still have the picture on my office wall.
It really is remarkable what this sport and this game does in bringing people together.
Unbelievable. It's hard to leave, I know that. It would be, but I think that you have an opportunity to maybe influence more people than you realize. And as I say, I've always preached that it comes from greatness, and achievement is from influence. You've been influenced, and I've been influenced by somebody along the line. It's okay to have a role model, just so it isn't some guy that's sleeping until 10 o'clock.
He died at 89, surrounded by family, but his legacy thunders on at tracks across America.
Today, we remember, we reflect, we say thank you. To those who led, healed, inspired, and created, your work endures.
Death may end a life, but not a legacy. We carry your stories forward,